Alright, another Cardfight Vanguard deck profile. After waiting for so long with few delays, I finally got my Liael Draconis, the evolved form of Liael Morta that is infused with Gabwellius. Something I've been waiting for ever since, probably set number 7, since that's when I was kinda expecting a new form of Liael Morta. But unfortunately, we didn't get a new form of Liael Morta by then, but at least we actually eventually got one, and in a way, it is a decent timing that we did. Even though most of the current season of Divines got delayed evolved forms, since most of them usually get evolved forms within at least 3 sets, Divines kind of took a different approach of releasing them a little later. And this time we got Liael, and I'm just very happy with it because Liael Draconis did fix some of the issues of the deck. This deck originally had so many issues that mechanic-wise, it's an okay mechanic, it can be a little interesting, but the way how it functions and what you're forced to do makes the deck sometimes not work. Because originally, when you're playing it as just Liael Morta, the deck focused on just superior calling the same unit as it bound, and that was the deck's playstyle. Now with Liael Draconis, it fixes few issues, which will be explained later, and also because Liael Morta was designed in a way where it's anti-Blandgmire. And basically it had its own PG skill, so you always have to choose in between whether you want to save it as a PG or Persona Ride, which I always use as a Persona Ride, and it's just an alternate PG if you need to use it, but that's just personal preferences. But now with Liael Draconis, you don't need to pick between them anymore, and Liael Draconis fixed another issue for the deck, which is also great. And also, of course, we got some support, but then there's also that one card from set 11 that also kind of helps out the deck a bit, but let's just ignore that for the moment. But the deck still suffers from few issues, mainly with the counterblast, because the deck in the Divine skill turn mainly uses a lot of counterblast, especially on top of adding her partner, Gabwellius, because once again, Gabwellius is a part of Liael Morta, hence we got Liael Draconis, so Gabwellius has to be in the deck. And Gabwellius itself uses a lot of counterblast, and the deck doesn't have its own way of countercharging besides few certain cards that you're forced to run. But anyway, with all that out of the way, let's just begin the deck profile with, of course, the Ride deck. So starting off, we still have the same old Ride line with Banista to the grade 1 Alephus. So just like the Zorga one, except that when you ride the grade 2, you can Soul Blast 1, draw 2, and then discard a normal unit. It does kind of suck that you have to discard a normal unit because of the fact that it could be a key piece, but it will be explained later on with the next card. And technically will be explained with Liael Draconis as well, because you do kind of want the normal units in the drop zone now. But the grade 2 kind of contradicts Liael Draconis, so it's kind of awkward. Because we got Elfgina, where when your Liael rides on top of it, you can return 3 normal units from the drop zone to the bottom of the deck to draw a card. Which normally, if you were playing just Liael Morta, this would have been great, just because of the fact that you have those resources back in the deck. Because now we go to Liael Draconis herself. Yes, we are skipping the evolution, and you technically don't need to run the original one, but the original one can still be run just because of one certain skill. But Liael Draconis has 3 skills, so just like the original Liael Morta, when this card attacks, you can counterblast 1, bind one of your rear guards, choose a card with the same card name as one of the cards bound. And of course, you just call that unit, which of course will inherit your multi-attack. That's very important, because now you can superior call anything as long as you have the same card name bound, not the one that you just bind. Liael Morta has to be the one that you just bound. But additionally, just like the original Liael Morta, it has the same Divine skill technically. So you basically, at the end of battle attack, you can superior ride any Liael, so it doesn't have to be just herself, and ride it as stand with only 1 drive check. Because the original one is a drive -1, this one is only 1 drive check, which does make a difference depending on how you actually add up your skills and depending on future support, but at the moment, the 1 drive check doesn't really matter. But the new added skill, which makes this card more of an offensive Liael, is the part where act once per turn, Energy Blast 4, bind a card from your field or drop zone, and then discard a card, which is not a cost by the way, but you are forced to discard if you have a card in your hand. So if you have 0 cards in your hand, you don't need to discard. And it gets drive +1 in the turn. So what this does is that it gives you 1 additional bind, which is very huge because that means that now you can activate additional skills. This is something that Liael always had problem with because the original one only can bind once a turn, and that is just absurdly slow. So the fact that this card can let you bind 2, giving you more stuff in the bind zone in the process, thus powering up the second skill, is just very huge just because you got more options, of course more skills to add, and also triple drive pressure is always pretty nice. hence why it doesn't say drive -1. Instead, it just says 1 drive check because of that. But also because of that second bound, you now have Liael Amorta's PG skill active on your first grade 3 ride, which is also very huge. Hence why this is already a huge improvement because it increases an extra bind, which is always something that Liael really needed. And also, of course, attack pressure with it, while still inheriting its old stuff with a little more flexibility. And that's just what makes this one much better than the original, hence why I like Liael Draconis and it's awesome in the design. And now to continue off, to the main deck, of course, 3 more for Persona riding because the deck still lacks in power in a way, but although one new support kind of fixes that up a bit. And then, of course, you run 3 Liael Amorta, originally of course main Vanguard. You could run 4, I've seen people run 2, it's personal preferences, but I think 3 is a sweet number just for this one skill, because when placed on Guardian you can discard a card from your hand and also choose 2 cards from your bind zone, and that could even be the face down ones, to the bottom deck, and then PG the attack on your faded one, which your Liael Draconis is still faded one, even as its original name. So yeah, that's pretty huge right there. And I don't really need to talk about the other skills since you're not going to use them at all. Maybe the first one where on attack you can house 1, choose one of your rear guards to bind, and this superior call the same card name as that one, hence why this one's weaker than Draconis, as Draconis can superior call any of the same card names as the cards that are in the bind zone, compared to this one where you can only call the one that is bound. And of course the last skill is just the same divine skill, except that it's drive -1 instead, but that doesn't really matter for this, you just use it for the PG skill, and just in case as an alternate ride. And then to the last grade 3, which is your main partner grade 3, is Gabwellius. I originally ran this as 4, but then I found myself being a little bit too much because Gabwellius is a late game type card, but it's also your main partner. So you have to run Gabwellius, and you do want to see him as soon as possible, but you don't want to see him too soon, so I think 3 is a good number. You just need to see at least one of these. Because Gabwellius, when placed on rearguard, you can Soul Blast 1. You can look at the top card of your deck to put it either on the top or bottom, but you put it at bottom, plus 5k. And then when this card attacks, well, you have at least 4 damage, plus 5k. And then after that, if you have a faded 1 Vanguard, you can Counter Blast 1. If you did not perform drive checks this turn, plus 10k instead. And also, it gets 1 drive check. Yep, rearguard pressure drive check, which is why Gabwellius is practically a staple to every faded one. But this Counter Blast does add up, so just be careful with it. But essentially, this is your finisher card, and it's also your main partner, so you do have to run this. And luckily, with the new Liael Draconis, you don't need to run a 4th copy, because originally you had to, of course, Liael Amorta had to bind the same copy to call the same copy. So you just need to see it as soon as you can, but you don't want that many, and usually it's in the late game. That's why I run 3 as a sweet number. So that's it for the grade 3 lineup to the grade 2 lineup. So first off, I still run Idrius. I've seen people not run this, some people run it, but personally I kind of like it. Originally this was also a 4 copy as an alternate bind target, especially for early game, but because you don't really need it as much, especially on the board, I cut it down to 3 because of the second skill where when this card is bound, you can Soul Blast 1 while your Vanguard's Liael to draw a card, and then choose one of your Vanguards, it gets plus 5k power in turn. So it helps your Vanguard with power, and also it's a bind target overall, which could also be bound from the drop zone for the extra draw. That's why I like to run this card, although do watch out for the soul, although your soul is a bit fixed now, so it's not as bad. But also it gets plus 10k power while you have a bind copy in your bind zone, which is also very huge when your Liael Draconis could actually bind a copy from the drop zone, and while you have this on board, so you got your 20k attacker immediately. But this is more here as an alternate bind target, hence why I decided to run this, and also it could be a discard target too now, which is why I kind of like it. And besides, I'm not running any orders in this deck as well, so I am just choosing this. Next up, 3 Sequence Wizard. Originally it was a 4 of as well, but considering how many superior call and draw power I have, I saw myself not really needing the Sequence Wizard as much. But basically, when placed on rearguard on main phase, while your Vanguard is at least a grade 3 Liael, you can Counter Blast 1 to look at top 5 cards of your deck to superior call one of them that is grade less than or equal to your Vanguard, and of course shuffle your deck, which of course being a superior call card makes this really usable, and of course it's worth playing, unless you prefer running the order cards, but personally I prefer this. Especially for the second skill where when one of your cards are bound by Vanguard's ability, this card gives us 5k power and then you may soul charge 1. The huge thing is that this is not once per turn. So with Leo Draconis being able to additionally now bind from the drop zone, you get another 5k power and a soul charge. And then on attack, you can do another bind and another soul charge. And if you do the Draconis Divine skill, that's another bind and a soul charge. So yeah, you can potentially soul charge 3 times in one turn, only on the divine skill turn, but usually 2 times in a turn, which could actually make this pretty powerful as a soul charge engine, which is actually why many people run this along with being able to superior call. So yeah, in a way, soul is not much of an issue anymore, unless if you do not really draw into this. Especially since this next card, Liael, does use Soul, because on place, while your Vanguard's a Leo, you can Soul Blast 1 to look at top 7 cards of your deck to choose either one at least grade 3 Leo, or one Gabwellius from among them and add to your hand. You have a total of 11 targets in this deck, at least on the way how I built it, so yeah, there's no reason not to run this already, and especially when you could basically search for a PG out of Liael Morta, or search for a Key Beast out of Gabwellius, or search for a Persona Ride for next turn. But the second skill during your turn, if you have at least a grade 3 Vanguard Leo, plus 5k, but your bind zone has a Gabwellius as well, plus 10k instead. Hence why Gabwellius is very important to see as soon as you can. But luckily, because you have a search power, you don't need to run as many Gabwellius. That's why I run 4 of this. And also being a main bind and superior call target is also what makes this as a 4 of. That's why you just kind of have to see it. And into the last grade 2, which will eventually be taken out for the new support card. But right now it's Exile Dragon because it's a generic character card that when being discarded during your turn, you can Soul Blast 1 to call it to rearguard. But if it's during battle, it cannot attack during the turn. Considering that Leo is forcing you to discard, this could be another discard option. And also since you're superior calling a lot, you also get the boost ability because of its second skill. So I just decided to run this at the moment. But once the new card comes out, this is immediately leaving along with maybe Idrius. And so that's it for the grade 2 lineup to the grade 1 lineup. So to the new grade 1 Owl Move. So Owl Move, when placed on rearguard while your Vanguard's Leo and it's placed from hand, you can energy charge 1. You get 3 energy per turn, but Leo Draconis uses 4 energy, which is always something people do not like. But honestly, you're not going to really use up all your energy in a single game, so it should be okay. But the second skill is the important one because when this card boosts while your Vanguard's at least a grade 3 Leo and your opponent's Vanguard's at least grade 3, put this to Soul, and then you get this skill into the end turn, not your Vanguard, you do. Your whole front row gets 5k power. And yes, this can potentially stack. So basically, you boost the rear guard, put this to Soul, your whole front row gets 5k power for the rest of the turn. And that includes your newly ridden Vanguard as well, or anything that you superior called. And potentially it could stack, but of course the stacking just adds up over time. But still, it helps out with the soul and also helps out a bit with the power when it comes to Leo because Leo does lack power sometimes. So that's why you run this. You could cut this down to 3, but I found putting it to soul with the extra power very helpful, so I like it at 4. And then 2 Kragon because it's a divine skill countercharger and you do superior call a lot in this deck, so this card is easy to just trigger. Yes, it's mostly the divine skill turn and mostly because of Gabwellius, but I do recommend running a countercharger for the deck, so I choose this one. If you do have the money, go ahead and run the Angel, but I am not buying more than one playset of the Angel, especially when I'm already playing it for another deck. So if you want your budget option, here it is. And then finally, the Saragon, which I might even run a 4th copy, because the ride line causes the little bit of issue where the grade 2 returns 3 units, and sometimes Draconis doesn't really have anything to bind from the drop zone. So this is just basically a way to increase your drop zone because of its skill. Because when this card boosts, while you have more rear guards than your opponent, or you play an order this turn, plus 5k, and at the end of battle, retire this unit to basically look at top 2 cards of your deck to choose one of them to put to your hand and then the other to the bottom. The part where it retires itself is very helpful to fill up your normal units in the drop zone, especially at the early game, which is why I really like this card. And it also filters up your deck and also adds stuff to your hand, which is also very huge. So I do find this card very useful because of that. If you want to, once again, you can run the Angel instead because the Angel also kills itself to let you draw it, but also the new Angel can do a counter charge, but it does cost Soul Blast 2 and requires you to get a trigger, which of course you're more likely willing to. But I like Saragon just because I already had it and also because of the choice add to hand, but mainly because it also fills up the drop zone at the early game as well, which is also very huge. And then finally 4 PGs with the Sanctitude. Choose whatever you want to do. And then for trigger lineup, OT, because I don't have any other OT, I'm using the Cater one. 8 crits, 3 draws. You could run fronts instead, but I do find myself sometimes needing to draw those key pieces, so I do prefer running draws at the moment, but you could run fronts if you prefer, because you are triple driving. And finally 4 heals, and 2 being counters. And so that's it for this deck profile on my Leo Draconis. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend? And what other changes would you make? Other than maybe adding those order cards, because I don't feel like adding order cards for a really unit heavy base deck. But other than that, I really like the deck, especially with the new upgraded Liael. It's very huge to the original, of course, because it can give you 1 additional bound. It's a more offensive version of Liael, and also it's now a dragon lady, which I also love dragons. And also making use of old support, which is also something I like. And overall, Leo Draconis does fix some issues with the deck, which is also very huge. But other than that, it's just basically a huge upgrade to basically an existing mechanic that also makes the deck a little more flexible. The deck still kind of suffers few issues, mainly with the counterblasts and a bit with the power. But other than that, I really do like the deck. There is still that one card in set 11 I am going to be waiting for. That is going to replace the Idrius, as if that card is bound, you can Superior Call it as a booster as well, which is also very nice, and it gets bound at the end of the turn, which will of course keep your buying count, especially for Leo Morta skill, because Leo for a long time had consistency issues, especially when you're forced to run 4 copies, and if you lose one, it just feels bad, and also being very slow, as you can only bind once a turn. New Leo Draconis, extra bind, which activates additional skills, letting you free up your Leo Morta for its PG skill, which is also very huge, and I love that it makes use of Gabwellius, which is also very nice. But on that, there's really not much to say about this deck, because it's just an upgrade of a previous existing deck that basically gave it a little more consistency, but also in a way fixed up a failed mechanic which could have probably been done way sooner. But anyway, that's it for this, and see you next time.